Welcome to the Healthy and Redeemed podcast, hosted by Healy Eichert. Healy is a licensed counselor with a passion for helping Christians live healthier lives, emotionally and spiritually. Each episode combines the truth of God's Word with practical advice to help you in your everyday life. Whether you want to grow emotionally, strengthen your faith, or handle life challenges with more peace, this podcast is for you. We're so glad you've joined us. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Healthy and Redeemed podcast. I am your host, Healy. Thank you so much for joining me. Have you ever experienced a loss in your life of some sort? Maybe a loss of a job, maybe a friend moved away, maybe you lost the opportunity to fulfill a dream or a desire that you had. Maybe you lost a relationship, maybe you lost your health or a loss of finances, or maybe you've experienced a death of someone, a loss of an actual person. That's what we're going to talk about today specifically, is this process of grief. Grief is a natural response to a loss and can happen anytime that we experience a loss. But today we're going to talk specifically about when someone we love dies. The title of this episode is called, Is This Normal? Exploring the difficult journey of grief. I wanted to title it, Is This Normal? Because oftentimes in my counseling office, most of the people that come in that are experiencing the death of someone close to them, that is always one of their first questions. Is this normal? Because the feelings are just so powerful, they're not sure that it doesn't actually feel normal. So the term grief, as I mentioned, it's a natural response that we have to loss. It can be defined as an emotional suffering caused by the loss of someone or something. So again, any loss that we have in our life. And although grief is just part of being human and no one is exempt, so any of those I mentioned earlier, probably all of you have had that at some point in your life, even if you're young. The grief process is unique to each person. There is no right or wrong way to think or to feel in response to the grief that you have. And that's good news. But it also can be somewhat overwhelming because, again, we think this isn't normal as we look at others and how they've experienced it and how they've walked through, that we can start feeling like, oh my goodness, what am I going through over here? So it's important to know the stages of grief, and that kind of helps us know what we're going to be going through. So there are these 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So let me just briefly talk about what these stages look like and things that we might be saying to ourselves. So in this stage of denial, we may be feeling shock or disbelief. Maybe we don't believe that it's actually happening. We cannot take it all in. It might feel like a dream. Our mind may shut down and the loss just does not feel real. We might be saying to ourselves, this can't be happening. In the stage of anger, we may feel some resentment. Anger may be at the situation, at people involved. We may be mad at ourselves. We may be mad at God. We may be mad at the person who has died. In the anger stage, we may be feeling resentment. Anger may be at the situation or at God or toward the person who has died or other people that have been involved, or maybe even at ourselves. But when we express anger, that is a positive sign because it means we are going through the healing processes, because each stage of this is part of the healing process. We will be bouncing around in these, so it's not like, okay, I'm done with anger. Once we've experienced it, we will continue to bounce around in this. But it is a positive sign as long as you don't stay in one stage, you're good. So what we might be saying to ourselves in this stage is, why me? It's not fair. Why them? Why did you leave me? Why did you let this happen? In the negotiating or bargaining stage, we may try to bargain our way out of the death by making promises, to God, to ourselves, to the person about how things will be different. We may be saying things like, I will be good if I'm praying fervently so they will live. Please change this situation and I will do better. In the stage of depression, we may exhibit symptoms of great sadness. We may shut ourselves off and go into a shell or become super active and need to be with others. We will be feeling the pain of the loss. We may be crying or laughing. Tears and laughter are closely related. We might be saying to ourselves, I am so sad. Why bother with anything? Lord, just take me. I don't want to feel this way. The last stage is acceptance or peace. That is a point where we accept the loss and we're able to move on to a healthy way. We can say to ourselves, it's going to be okay. I miss them, but I will get through this. In these 5 stages, just to know they're not really like you hit one, boom, you hit one. They're not like levels. We're not just going to go through them like they're typical stages. They don't fall into neat little categories. We're going to fluctuate between the stages very often and very frequent, and that is completely normal. But it can also feel very frustrating. So yes, it is very normal to go through, to pop in and out of these stages quite a lot. The most important phase of this is acceptance or peace. And that basically is the final stage, not saying that you won't have these others at times still, but you'll have a sense of peace about it, because in this peace or acceptance stage, it means that you've learned to live your life without that loved one anymore, or without the thing that you've lost. So it could be a job or maybe a changing of church or relationship. You learn how to do life without that person or without that thing. So it doesn't mean that you forget them or you don't miss them, but just that you're able to continue living in a healthy way without them. It means things that the death in your life has found a place. It's found a place. Trying to ignore the pain of grief will not make it go away. And oftentimes, this is one thing that people don't like all these feelings, because there's something very unique about the process of grief. It can literally pull up all your feelings, like all the emotions that you have, they can just be all in like this tangled ball of emotions. And that is foreign to a lot of people and not something that we're used to. And it's very difficult to articulate. So just know that trying to ignore those emotions or that pain that you're experiencing, it's not going to make it go away. It only delays it. And at some point, you're going to have to deal with it. Healing comes from feeling the emotions as they come. It means going through the pain, even if it's difficult. And that is, healing will always mean going through. Healing is never around. It's never under. It's never over. It's never take some other detour. Healing always comes from walking through whatever you're experiencing. It doesn't really matter what it is in life, whether it's trauma, whether it's anxiety or depression. Healing's going to come as you walk through the tough stuff. And that's the only way that it comes. Unless it's a miracle that God just, gives to you. I mean, that's great. But most of the time, God calls us to walk through things because that's good for us. It builds our character. It does lots of things in our life. So it's not a bad thing when God calls us to walk through stuff. Jesus knows the pain that we have, and He is going to help us through it. It is okay to experience those hard emotions, and it's okay to cry or not to cry. We don't want to hold back our crying, but it's okay. Whatever we feel at that moment is okay. As usual, I will say, we don't want to get all overwhelmed by our emotions in the sense that we're just going to give in to them. We don't feel like doing anything, therefore we don't. We're not going to get into that place. We're going to stay healthy in the midst of our grief. Death and loss is something that all of us have to experience at some point. And although it might feel lonely and that no one understands, it is important to process through the emotions with God, with others, and with yourself. What grief do we see in the Bible? Here are just some people that come to the top of my mind. Remember Jacob? He lost his wife. She died in the midst of childbirth or shortly thereafter. Jacob also lost his favorite son, Joseph. He thought Joseph had died. Joseph had not died, but Jacob grieved as if he had, because he saw the coat that was covered in blood, so he thought he had died. Remember Naomi? She experienced the loss of her husband. He died, and her 2 sons died. Remember David? He lost his best friend in death. He lost his child to death. And he also experienced many losses through his family, specifically through his sons, as they betrayed him in many different ways. Remember Job? He probably had the most losses that we know of, but he lost all of his children. They all died. He lost his wealth. He lost his reputation. He lost all his animals and many of the homes that his children lived in. I would say even at some level, he lost the trust of his friends. If you remember Aaron, Moses' brother, he lost his 2 sons when they were killed because they offered sacrifices in an unholy way. You remember the Apostle John? He was exiled to the island of Patmos, and I presume that he lost everything in that exile. I don't know that. I'm just guessing. Benjamin, that was Jacob's son. He never knew his mom because she died, as I said, shortly after giving birth. So although he may not have experienced the actual loss of her, he grew up with her memory, and I'm sure his dad conveying to him his great loss too.
Do you want to teach your children godly traits such as kindness, gratitude, and forgiveness? The Red Ball is a story of Renata, a young girl who receives a special gift. When that gift goes missing, she is left to figure out what to do. Through her journey, she learns a lot about herself and what forgiveness really means. The lessons found in the book can be made even more meaningful with the Red Ball Companion Activity Book, featuring over 30 activities. Both books are the perfect addition to any homeschool curriculum or as a thoughtful anytime story. Get your copy today and help your child build a heart that reflects Jesus.
What are some common physical effects of grief? So the things that we feel physically when we're grieving: fatigue or exhaustion, headaches, dizziness, nausea. We might have digestive problems. We might have an increased startle response. We might have a decreased appetite, a reduced immune response. We might have problems with our sleep or increased physical pain. The interesting thing about physical effects of grief, these are often effects that we also have, similar ones to when we have excessive stress, which, of course, this is what we're going through if we're experiencing the loss of someone, right? Remember the episode that I talked about nefesh, our soul, and how it's all integrated? Everything is integrated. Our mind, our body is all integrated as one. This is one of those times that you can see this integration as we're feeling all these emotions and they're overwhelming. We're actually having physical side effects also. We also have some cognitive effects. We might have a hard time making decisions. We might have a hard time concentrating or remembering things. We might worry. We might even disassociate or be confused about things. We might blame ourselves for things. Spiritual effects that we have, We might feel disconnected from God. We might question God or be angry at Him. We might feel a spiritual emptiness. We might even withdraw from the faith community or just feel separate from them. We might feel disconnected from people or have this feeling like no one understands us or what we're going through. We might have an increased awareness of mortality, and we might experience guilt. So those are some physical effects, some cognitive effects, some spiritual effects we might have. What are the emotions that we might experience? Here are just some, but I will say, normally in grief, there's such a wide range of different emotions depending on the context that it's hard to get them all in one little list. But here are some common ones: shock, numbness, a sense of anguish, anxiousness, blame or guilt, fear, irritability, anger, sadness, depression, despair. You might even have feelings of relief or gladness. That's what I'm saying. Like all these, there's so many different emotions, they can be all tangled up together. So maybe you're thinking, if you haven't experienced a big loss in your life or a certain kind of loss, relief might be a weird emotion to have, or gladness. But sometimes if you've been caregiving for a very long time and you're a believer and the person that you've been caring for was a believer, and if they were suffering a lot, you can feel a sense of relief that they are no longer suffering, that you know that they were rejoicing in the arms of our Savior. That can bring a sense of relief and gladness, and like holding hands at the same time with sadness. So yes, all the emotions that we have around grief can be very tangled up and hard to define. These emotions can also be like a steady stream of water, or they can be like waves crashing into the shore, pulling back, crashing again, pulling back. So we might be going through the day just fine, and then the wave crashes and suddenly we're crying and we're angry and we don't understand why. But that's how grief works. It's really hard to just have it in a simple little explanation, because it's different for each person and different on each type of grief that they may be going through. But sometimes people can get to a place of peace relatively easy, but they just kind of feel those emotions underlying all the time. As I mentioned at the beginning, I said, well, is this normal? I'm feeling this way. Yes, it is normal to feel that way. It is part of the grief process. It looks different for each person. And although the emotions can feel very abnormal, most of the time, what you're feeling is normal. Sometimes that in and of itself is helpful for people. I did have a person come in one time. I just saw them once, and that's all they wanted to know is what I'm going through, a normal response. I feel like I'm going crazy. And I said, it is normal. And it hadn't even been that long since that person had died. Of course, that's normal. Yes, you're going to go through all these emotions like 50 times a day, especially in the beginning. The other question a lot of people ask is, how long does grief last? And really, the duration of grief, it varies for each person and for each person that they're grieving. There's no set timeline, of course. There's no set timeline for when a person should feel all better. Sometimes you just have to think of it as it takes as long as it takes. Here's a few things that I tell people. Once everybody else in your life kind of moves on and they get back to normal, and there's no more casseroles coming, and there's no more cards in the mail, and no one asking how you are, there is an extra hardness in that period, because you're still grieving and everybody else has gone on with their normal life, which they have to. However, that can be an especially hard process in this journey. But you'll get through that. That will pass. Also, I like to warn people that first year is also going to be harder. whatever harder in this particular moment looks like. The first year, you have to experience certain days and holidays that are going to be difficult. You have to go through the birthday. You have to go through the Mother's Day or Father's Day or anniversary days or Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter or whatever those holidays that were important to your loved one was. You have to go through those. You have to figure out what that looks like. And that's hard that first year. But I'm going to provide some tips at the end to help you get through that. Here is what I like to tell people. If your intensity of grief and the emotions in that grief don't change from that first month through the many months following, if it doesn't change at all, that intensity is still the same as it was at the beginning, then that might be a sign that you need to go to a counselor and work through something else. It might just mean you need to go to a support group, a grief support group, or talk to your pastor or talk to someone else that you might need a little extra assistance. But normally all that hard stuff is completely normal. It is a part that you just have to work through. But if you notice, and that's the key word, I just want you to remember, intensity. If the intensity is the same, if that doesn't change at all, that's what you need to pay attention to, okay? And we'll look at prolonged and complicated grief also, so you can kind of just be aware of that. What is the difference between grief and mourning? Grief is the internal experience of loss. It just is what involves all the emotions and your thoughts regarding the loss. And mourning is the external expressions or rituals associated with the loss. So you'll often see mourning in the Bible, that there's a set time of mourning and then there's certain things that they do. So to mourn in the Bible, it may mean you wear sackcloth or you fast or you shed tears. For us, it might be we are taking a time off work. We're pulling back a bit from something. It means going to a funeral. It means maybe wearing black there or whatever you do in the external expression of that grief. How can you support someone who is grieving? This is going to look different for each person who is grieving, though. I think one of the things we really have to know the relationship we have with someone. So that's going to look different. Like I'm going to provide support differently for one person than I may like my best friend or my mom or someone like that, because I know them differently. But normally the ministry of presence is a good thing. Just being present with someone, hearing them, listening to them, showing up with lunch or cup of coffee might be something that would be helpful to them. But again, if you remember in Job when he was grieving the loss of his health, I didn't even mention that earlier. That was a big one. The loss of his health and his friends. They sat with him for 7 days and didn't say a word. I mean, that is the ministry of presence right there. They would have been better if they would have kept on doing that. It was sometimes when they talked that turned out they weren't all that helpful. And that's typically the same with us. Normally, I can say for the most part that people are trying to be helpful when they say things. Often they aren't, though. And I hear people say this a lot, that they don't find help when people try to say certain words to encourage them. Usually we don't try to fix or offer cliches to the person. Things like the Lord needed another angel or God needed them there. Those two statements aren't even theologically correct anyway. And they're kind of insensitive. Well, they are insensitive. Even little things like God's going to bring good from this. At least they're not in pain anymore. two might be true, but they're not helpful. I normally just stick with I'm sorry. A hug might be helpful for them. But if you don't know someone well, just saying I'm sorry. Normally, if we ask the person some questions about their loved one, that can be helpful to them. Or if we have something that their loved one did for us or a special memory, it might be appropriate to share. Stories are really helpful for them who are grieving to share. Sometimes it may be too fresh to do that, but that's why it's really important to know your relationship and know what is appropriate to offer and what's not. And praying for them, whether they know it or not, it is important to pray for people who are grieving. It's hard and not everybody knows how to do it well. I know people that they just go over and do things for the person. Again, I think that depends on relationship. I can't go over to just person's house I don't know that well and just, offer to do something. Maybe I could, I don't know. That's not really my personality, but for someone I knew well, I probably could. Although that would still be pretty outside my personality. But I try to stay consistent to who I am. I do care about people, and I will either provide a resource for them, I will tell them I'm sorry, I will pray for them, and ask them how they're doing, because I know those things are hard. We're not always going to have the right things to say, and I try not to get caught up in saying the exact right thing. I'm a counselor, and I know facts that I have not said the right things a lot of the times, and people don't say the right things to me either. And people forget way too fast. I mean, according to me, but this is life. Not everybody's going to be sensitive to our needs. This episode was longer than I had planned, so next time please join me for the remaining part of the episode. I will talk about prolonged or complicated grief, what that looks like, as well as practical steps for a healthy grieving process. Now let's go out and live healthy and redeemed, reflecting Jesus Christ rightly in all that we do. Lord willing, I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. The information provided is to be used as a resource. If you have a serious mental issue, we would encourage you to contact a therapist in your state.